There we go. Right. So 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable show. We do this at around 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Friday. I've got a great panel. I've got a great special guest. I've got Rob Rowley joining us. I'm going to, if you don't know about Rob, I'm going to do a quick intro for Rob, and then I'm going to let the rest of the panel introduce themselves. Rob is the former founder of the popular CRM and email marketing platform Drift. He also is the presenter of one of the leading podcasts in the startup community, Startups for the Rest of Us. Rob is also the joint founder of Tiny Seeds, the startup accelerator for bootstrap companies, which also mentors and invests in these companies. Rob is also the chief individual behind the leading startup conference, MicroCamp, and also the author of a number of business books aimed at bootstrappers and the startup community. In other words, Rob is a bit of an overachiever. So,
how many hours does this guy have in his week? This guy's crazy. Is he like? Yeah, he must be really old and like work all the time or something.
I don't know how you do it actually, but there we go. I'm going to let Heather introduce herself. Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Wild-Renzi. I am the digital solutions lead at The Difference and author of Birth of a Unicorn.
All right, and I've got Spencer. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Spencer Foreman from WPLaunchify.com.
And I've got my friend John Locke. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
John from LockdownSEO.com.
Right, so let's go into our first story. Liquid Web requires Give WP. So Spencer, what did you think of this one? I didn't see this one on the radar.
Yeah, so I put my call into Chris Lemma. He's a very busy man, so he apparently did not have time to chat with me about it, but I always like to get the inside scoop. Here's the deal. I know the guys directly at Give WP. They've done, like many other authors, that Jack is one of my favorite, of course. They've focused on a particular niche solution in the plugin format. They work with some of the same tool sets, so I've had a chance to go behind the scenes on how they do it. Really, really efficient guys, built a great business. The question that's intriguing to me is, what is the buyout? And what are the side deals? Now, we all know there's going to be an NDA, and Rob is an expert on this, so that's not going to be revealed. But we can speculate that it's probably a 1.5 to 2 times multiplier. It could be higher because it's subscription. There's probably some ability, because we've seen Liquid Web allow companies to carry on. I was curious to know, maybe Chris will tell me later, what is the thing behind the founders' motives. But I suspect, because that's what Jack and I talked about, and I've heard Rob talk about it candidly, it's like, is the amount of money enough to give them sort of like we're good level to go on and do the next thing? And for that, they have the income stream that can be calculated to say, yeah, probably true. I mean, their ARR on this business is clear that it's in the 7 figures. So multiply that and realize that those two guys can go on and do stuff. And when I talked to Jack about it this morning, I don't want to say what Jack says publicly, but I will say what I thought about it publicly, which is I said, if you make a cash cow and you can work it out that other people milk the cow for you after a certain number of years, do you want to sell the cow? And I'm 54. The answer for me at 54 is far different than somebody in their 20s or 30s, because I've already done the kids and the divorce and the custody and like going on with my life. And I see life as yeah, you know what? Like having a cow that milks a couple $1 million a year and somebody else milks it sounds a lot better than when I was in my 30s and I wanted to conquer the world and did various things to that end. So I think it's a good buyout, it's a good deal, and it's an interesting thing for a WordPress plugin to get there.
Yeah, so Rob, there seems to be a lot more activity in the WordPress community, a lot more buyouts and that. What's your view on this particular one and the amount of activity you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the, private equity was, 10 years ago only buying companies, software companies of any kind, of $100 million and up, right? 10, 15 years ago. And then this micro private equity started making a movement, especially into SaaS because of the appeal of the subscription revenue. And we are now seeing that same thing follow into WordPress. I think over the past I'd say what, 12 to 36 months, maybe 18 to 36. It's like there is both. In this case, there's just a consolidation, right? It's a web host acquiring. I know Liquid Web is more than that, but at its core, it's a web host acquiring pieces and kind of rolling them up. And I think that's how industries. That's what happens in industries, right? Is consolidation. There used to be 100 U.S. car manufacturers, and now there are 3. Correct me if I'm wrong. there are 2 or 3, depending on how you define it. And that's normally that's naturally what happens. And the cool part is, for the I don't know the founders of GiveWP, but if assuming that they did walk away with millions of dollars, and by walk away I mean they work at Liquid Web for the next couple of years on an earnout, but then they can now go off and start that next thing if they decide to. And knowing ambitious startup founders, they probably will. And so I don't think it's I don't look at this as a net loss. I look at this as now we have smart founders who have experience and who have done it once or multiple times in their case, are now have some money at their back, and they can now go on and build an even bigger and better thing next time if that's their desire.
Yeah, great. So Heather, what do you think?
I think it's just a win-win, like everybody else is saying. Like, this is a good company. They've proven in the philanthropy space that they understand a product, and that's like a benefit for Liquid Web to have that experience on their team, because it's different from what other people are doing in WordPress. Yeah, I mean, like they're the number one provider for philanthropy-based WordPress sites, and that can only be good to have in the network.
What interested to me, John, was that it seemed to be bought by Liquid Web. It didn't seem to be. It's not going to be under the iTheme umbrella. Am I correct about that, John?
Yeah, it's iThemes is operating in its own thing, and I had actually forgotten that they had acquired the events calendar last year. But what you're really seeing in the WordPress space is a lot of the hosting companies are acquiring suites of products to have under their banner. You're seeing WP Engine acquiring Genesis and Cadence Blocks. You're seeing GoDaddy acquire Managed WP. And a few years ago, the Media Temple. So this is no different. Liquid Web is, basically doing the same thing, and they're positioning themselves as one of the top hosting companies by having these other products underneath its banner.
Yeah, and had Stephen, my co-host of my interview show, joining us. Stephen, the only thing is that I'm not totally sure about all these hosting companies, because none of them at the present moment have done what I thought they were going to do. Basically say, well, you can only use this plugin if you use our hosting. None of them have done that yet. Is that coming, and when do you think that's, or do you think they won't be able to do that?
I would be surprised if they went that direction. I mean, I think from a hosting company perspective, like there's 2 ways that you're looking at this. Is one, it's another cash stream revenue generating sort of mechanism. And then 2, it's a user acquisition. And probably its primary focus is how do you acquire more users? As soon as you wall that off into your own garden, then it stops acquiring you any users at all. The thing that I find the most interesting is inside of the WordPress space and this whole acquisition is a lot of the acquisitions are fairly small. This is probably one of the bigger ones. But it still also feels very disjointed. You have a lot of companies buying a lot of random plugins that are still kind of sitting in their own isolated environment. I feel like you can only get so much utility from that. I think the next move after everybody's, gotten all of their monopoly properties, if you will, or all their little plugins and assembled their armies, how do you start combining those? How do you start working off of each other instead of having all of these silos? And to me, that's when things get really interesting, because that's an even bigger problem to solve. And how do you go in that direction versus just, this plugin looks cool, I'll buy that, or I like this user base, I'll buy this user base. Is how do you combine that user base and create an engine that can overpower your competition? That feels like a really hard challenge and something that'll probably happen, a couple of years down the road here. But I think it'll be interesting to see. All
right. Before we go on to our next story, I want to talk about one of my major sponsors, and that's Costas. If you're looking to get into podcasting, which I think you should look at, I've loved podcasting myself. Rob loves it. It's a great way of communicating to your clientele and to your tribe. Now, you need a platform to host your audio files, and you need an RSS feed and a number of other things. And having that all in one unified interface is helpful. I was with a previous company, I won't mention them, but I got a bit tired with their interface, and they were a little bit expensive. Castors came on the scene, had a quick chat with them. I paid it out of my own pocket, and they helped me move almost 500 episodes onto their platform. I've just been blown away. A really fabulous interface, about half the price of the previous company that I was using, and they've just been so helpful in the process. And we had a quick discussion. I said I was looking for a new major sponsor, and they decided that they would come on board. So I've just been delighted. So if you're looking for a great platform for podcasting for yourself or for your clients, you could do so much worse than going over to Castos and talking to them and using their platform. So on to the next story. And obviously Rob was here, and I listened to his own podcast every week, and he had an episode about the upcoming round of his tiny seed for spring 2021. So, Rob, obviously I'm not going to ask you to choose a favourite out your list, because that would be unfair. But what I am going to ask you is, are there any particular sectors, industry sectors, or particular sectors that really get your interest at the present moment? And secondly, how do you see WordPress as being part of maybe some of your choices? Is it more on your radar, you and your team?
You know, we don't specify or focus on individual sectors, because the reason large venture capital firms, and by large, I mean ones that want $1 billion or $10 billion outcome, they focus on sectors because you can't get $1 billion outcome in a lot of areas of the economy, especially if it's a commoditized space and you're starting a startup. So they need it to be clean energy, electric cars going to the moon. They need these huge, big deals. And we're not that. Tiny Seed is for bootstrappers. And for us, you know, a $40 million exit is a amazing, life-changing outcome for the founders. And it allows us to have successful returns. So we don't focus on any particular areas. I will say that we are an investor in Castos. They were in batch 1 of Tiny Seed. And I use them as well. You know, it's totally coincidentally, but we have, with that said, I mean, you know, across the 41 investments we've made through Tiny Seed, and then I have 16 of my own angel investments I made prior to that. So about 57 companies, including WP Engine, Castos, you know, it's companies you guys would know. We have seen that, you know, COVID and remote work has certainly helped any podcast app we're invested in, any remote work app we're invested in, and we saw it hurt any of the education apps because school was shut down. We just made an investment in someone that had a tough year last year, but is really doing well now. And they're in the senior, it's called Senior Place. They're senior placement software. So they're SaaS. So there are certain things that do really well and don't do really well depending on, you know, what's happening. But we just like to see really great founders. We like to see some traction, and we like to see that they're serving businesses. B2B is a big thing for us. In terms of WordPress, we do have, I believe it's 2 or 3 of companies that have WordPress plugins as a core kind of tenet, you know, a core piece of what they do. Castos is one, right? Seriously Simple Podcasting was what they built on top of to start Castos. You don't need a WordPress site these days, but that is where they have the most traction. And then Lasso Analytics is affiliate management and affiliate link management, and that they're in our 3rd batch here. So, and then there's another one in batch 1. So we definitely keep our eye out. I think for us, subscription, we're SaaS, right? So if it's not subscription, I don't think we've backed a single company that isn't subscription based. So that's if the WordPress can be subscription, we're all about it. And they have a little bit of traction, and they have founders who are driving it forward. But we love any type of software that charges on a recurring basis.
That's great. Heather, so what did you think of this group of companies that Rob and his team have invested in?
I think it's a good group. I mean, whenever you have a seed round of funding, you can expect about 10% of them to move forward, 15% at most. So look at this list and see which ones you think are going to move on and be successful. I mean, in this, I mean, it could be like 5 to 10 years, but I mean, take a look at this list and see which ones you think are going to be the good
Was there,
bets.
you know, I could ask you, I can't ask Rob this, but I can ask you, was there any that particularly caught your eye?
I like the cloud forecast group. I think that they are going to, I mean, that they have something useful. However, I mean, there's other companies that are doing something like that. The Lexco, I've actually used this company, although I've seen other companies in that field already go away. So I don't know how big of a niche this is. And Senior Place, like of all of them on here, I think Senior Place is the one that might have the biggest shot because the gray dawn is approaching, and we're already pretty top heavy in a lot of countries of how many people are entering retirement, as opposed to people that are entering the workforce. So and it's just getting bigger and bigger. I mean, in countries like China and Japan, there's already more people retired than there are entering the workforce, and they're trying very hard to get that. And we're rapidly approaching that in many of the larger cities in the U.S. as well. So I think, Senior Place and Cloud Forecast are the ones that I would bet on.
I'm watching Rob as you say that. I can't get any feedback from Rob's face at all. He's a great poker player, actually. John, what did you think of this seed round, and did any of the companies catch your eye?
You know, I didn't have a chance to look at like every single company on this list, but I think it's really cool how Tiny Seed and other angel investors, micro investors are making it easier for companies to get off the ground and start. So I think that is a valuable service.
Oh, and Rob, just a little bit about my background. I am a VC. I am an angel investor. I have been working on funds. I work in the travel, food, and biomechatronics. So, like, I mean, I do a lot with AI, but not in where you're funding. But
Sure.
That's
Yep. Very cool.
Right. Spencer, what did you think of this latest round? Did any of them catch your eye?
Your audio is bad.
Oh, right.
John's gone bad again. I have to cut you off, John. Let's
Yep.
Hello, folks. It's the new John. Let's carry on. I liked Rob's comment. I would pick up on it about the fact that subscriptions are really the future. In fact, I linked to an article that was like an alternative story for today from Wired about everyone is becoming a subscription, which is essentially the way of saying that we've become an economy of micro payments, but not in the way that we started out years ago where, you know, you're going to pay a nickel for this and a dime for that, but rather services and companies have realized the value of, let's call it the Netflix model of, I'm going to offer you something, you're going to build a relationship, and the deal is not going to be front loaded with a lot of obligation. It's going to be, we're going to give you something valuable in a small enough manageable chunk that you can set it and forget it. And I think, as to my original conversation in reference to the Give WP, that is one of the unique things about that particular buyout is that was a company from the WordPress stack that actually had the subscription base and the revenue to justify let's say a large scale buyout. Whereas there's only a couple even today as we sit here that can say they're in the solid 7 figures of the WordPress space. But I would imagine, you know, Rob's logic here is going to be the only logic of most VCs in the future. Like, why would you want to get into a company that only has a chance of selling somebody something once versus especially a sticky solution that is hard to undo, because then the cow is milking forever. And so I do see this as a trend. At the same time, my area of focus not being VC, but rather on the practical solutions of WordPress, I see that WordPress becoming this platform, there's a lot of innovation of, I'm going to make a solution now that fits into the stack of existing plugins instead of the previous incarnation, which was, I'm going to build a I'm doing everything plugin, and it's going to collide with all the other everything you do. It's much smarter to think in terms of being a Lego block today in WordPress than it is to be creating a whole new system.
Yeah, great. So, Stephen, what did you think? And did you like any of the particular companies selected?
Yeah, it's always fun reading through, a list of companies that are, there's so many companies out there. When someone like Rob's, done the work of going through all this stuff and this team there, it's always fun to see kind of what companies and what ideas have risen to the top. As far as like brackets, if we're building some sort of bracket system based on the companies, my theory is always find the coolest idea in the less sexy industry possible, and they probably have like the best chance of making it. Now, will they be the next unicorn? Maybe not, because sexy can add a lot of fire to the engine. But I think that when you have a new idea that you can put into some space that just isn't as cool, the competition is a lot less. So the senior place is probably what's piqued my interest the most. I'm just like reading through those companies.
Right, that's great. So on to story 3. I don't expect Rob to have much views on this particular one, but you never know. Classic widget plugin disables WordPress 5.8 upcoming block-based widget system. You just got to love the tavern and their titles, haven't you? They're artful in themselves. So Spencer, what did you think of this particular story?
Thanks. This is like, I'm a pilot, and this is, I don't want to get into the unfortunate realities of the families that lost family members, but like the 737 MAX software update. This kind of thing reminds me of the backwards logic that would make a company reliable like Boeing decide to change the fundamental nature of how a reliable long-term aircraft works to the point where it became deadly. Why, oh why would an official plugin be released from Automatic to essentially disable the thing that they're promoting at the other side of their mouth about why everybody needs to move to blocks? In other words, isn't that just sort of revealing, and unless I've completely missed what this does, that there's fundamentally an issue with the thing that's been released into the wild? I mean, it literally is the third or fourth thing I can think of in the last couple of months that we've talked about where there's nobody steering the ship here at all. I mean, as a user with experience, I can navigate around these icebergs, but like you came to WordPress as a platform and you're intuitively supposed to understand, well, here's the Gutenberg block editor, use this, but don't really use it because there's third-party software that really makes it better, but you got to choose and pick this. And by the way, here's an official plugin that disables this thing. And also we have this classic plugin that also disables this thing. And come on, it's insanity. No venture company would get away with this if it wasn't WordPress.
To me, it seems like it's WordPress's way where they can just kind of not do as much backwards compatibility. Like they've kind of drawn their backwards compatibility line somewhere, and then if that doesn't work for you, like install the plugin so we don't have to like deal with all of these edge cases and stuff. And if they were trying to build it back so that there would be no problems, like I don't know how you would build that. But I also would like to know how many plugins does one need to install to go back to the good old classic, because it seems like we're just piling up the plugins at this point.
It does seem to be getting a longer road.
I mean, what's shocking to me is this is an official plugin. I don't, unless I missed it, this is not like some, like me, who made the Gutenberg looks like classic plugin because I was annoyed. This is the official release, like from the same people making the editor. What's up?
So yesterday I installed a new site. I popped up another new site, and now I tried to not install immediately the Restore Classic plugin right away. I mean, that's normally my go-to. I tried to use the blocks, and I couldn't get 3 images lined up right away. I mean, like, I tried and tried, and they kept going horizontally. I gave it like an hour of me trying using the blocks.
Come on, you can do it, Heather. You can do it. You can get those 3 images in a line.
They in the preview, they were in a line. As soon as you hit publish, they went horizontal. And I was like, you know what? I mean, they were horizontal and then they went vertical as soon as I hit publish. So I gave it an hour of me just trying, and then I was like, nope, install classic, did the divs, and done.
But by the way,
how embarrassing! A former NASA lady can't get her 3 images in a row
because the blocks, it was there. I mean, like if I use the blocks, there was no way to configure it. So
I just want to point out, by the way, in supplement of this, because then I will shut up for the rest of the story, that an old friend has made a comment here, an old friend of the show, about why this is so awesome. So I won't name the name, but somebody should.
Please don't, because I'll get a phone call again. So don't.
I'm just saying, if you look at the nature of that comment, you start to see the origin of where there's difficulty at the higher levels, because there's no way that an objective person could say that that is a truthful statement or even remotely resembling what's going on here. Like Heather's experience is my experience, and other commenters have said it's schizophrenic for an experienced user, let alone a new user.
Now, Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot, Rob, but I'm sure you'll handle me in your classical diplomatic way. What do you think Automatic, as an outsider, what do you think of Automatic's performance recently?
So here's the thing. I'm not a WordPress developer. I'm not a WordPress consultant, but I am an end user, and I still manage and run 3 or 4 WordPress sites, including Startups for the Rest of Us, which has 550 podcast episodes. My wife's site, Zen Founder, which has 250 episodes. So we run. I would say I am a power user of WordPress. I used to be a developer. I don't hack WordPress anymore, but so I am perhaps a different perspective. And from the outside, when I saw this, when I first read the article, I thought, wow, that is the least clickbaity title I've ever seen in an article. The second thing I thought was, I know it wasn't intended to be clickbait, but second thing I thought was, well, I'm glad at least they released a classic plugin, so someone like me who doesn't want to learn the new system until it's fully functional can go backwards and stay where I am. And that was my initial thought. However, as soon as everyone started talking, I realized, wait a minute. As Spencer said, but should you need to do that if the new thing works really well? Like if your new approach works well? And this is a really hard balance. In building SaaS apps that we would have this legacy. We'd have stuff that we had to be backwards compatible, but we owned the entire code base, and it was still really hard. I can only imagine how hard this must be with WordPress. I mean, we all know just with the tens of thousands of plugins and all that. So I don't know that I can honestly comment on Automatic because I just don't follow this. This is a nitty gritty story that if I wasn't on the show, I wouldn't know until I logged into my WP or my repo, and I was like, why are the widgets all broken, right? And then I would be pissed off, and then I would go and Google this and probably find this article. I'm
not going to push you on this. I'm just going to remark we're almost over 2 years into this, Rob, Ooh. And also I've got a pretty smart lady here that can't put 3 images in a horizontal row. I think we've got some slight problems here, but there we go. That's just my faults. What do I know? I'm not a multi-millionaire, so what do I know? I think we're going to go for our break. When we come back, I've got some other great stories. We've got Rob with us as well. I've been really enjoying our discussion with Rob. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. Rob's been very diplomatic, as I expected. You can tell he's experienced in these matters.
I'm gearing up to be really opinionated about these next ones, though. Just watch out.
Oh, yeah. Right. There we go. I'll wait for the drum beat. Before we go into the next story, I want to talk about one of our other great sponsors. That's Conversio. If you're looking for real WordPress hosting that's really aimed at large websites and large companies, you could do a lot worse than Conversio. They really specialize in WordPress and performance. The owner of the company showed me their interface and some of the technology that they're building out internally. And to say I was pretty blown away. Also, for the WP-Tonic tribe, they provided a fantastic special offer. You can choose any of their plans. and you will get 30% for the lifetime of that plan. That is a tremendous saving, and it's a tremendous offer. How do you get it? Well, you just go to the WP-Tonic website. There's Conversio banners all over the website. You just click one of them. It will take you to a specific landing page where you can take up this fantastic offer. I suggest that you go and have a look at it. Right, on to story 4. Republic CEO Ken Nerger, I think it is, on making early stage investing for everyone. So, Rob, you know, I think I forgot the right term for it. I think you had to be an accredited investor. I think, does that mean that you have to? Am I correct in saying that in assets you got to have about $1 million in assets? And if you're not an accredited investor, you're a child, you know, you're just an idiot, and you can't manage your own
That's not true.
Seems to
financial. It does seem very patronising, or am I wrong about this, Robin? What do you think of what Ken is suggesting from Republic?
Yeah, these came from laws passed during the Great Depression, and until the Reg CF, the crowdfunding regulations came out, whatever, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was still the same accreditation laws, which means if you're a high net worth individual, worth more than $1 million in liquid assets, not including your home, or you make more than $200,000 or $300,000 a year, depending on if you're married, then you're accredited and you can invest in these venture deals, these early stage startups, funds like Tiny Seed. But if you're not accredited, you don't get to do that. And that's the federal government's, that's their approach to trying to protect people from being scammed, right? Protect people from fraud and stuff. And it's too blunt, I think, is the bottom line. I think it's patronizing. I think that there have to be controls in place, but I think anything like Reg CF or, you know, what Republic and WeFunder are now doing on the back of crowdfunding is a step in the right direction. And I think that we know that we can guess that in the next 6 to 12 months, there probably will be a big scandal. You know, remember Kickstarter when it started out? People were raising money, and then there was one that just failed miserably, and everyone said, "Oh, crowdfunding's dead." But it wasn't. I'm expecting the same thing to happen. You know, I mean, it's almost inevitable, law of large numbers. But to me, trying to be heavy-handed, you know, what if we have? What if someone literally works at a venture fund, or what if someone is, a stock trader, or what if someone is an executive? I mean, I was an executive running my 3rd SaaS company, doing 7 figures a year in annual revenue, but we weren't profitable because we were growing, and I was not accredited. And like I knew that I could invest in SaaS and be pretty sophisticated about it. So there are movements to get like sophistication testing in place, much like to get a driver's license, or, you know, to get a handgun or whatever. Like you have to take, I don't even know that you have to be tested to take a handgun, but, you know, there's certain things you need to be licensed for and you need to take a test for. And I think that that may be a better long-term solution. But with that said, I think crowdfunding is the best we have for now. And I think it's a step in the right direction.
So what did you think of this story, Stephen? What did you think of it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially from like how usable is this. Like I know back when I was involved in another startup, we kind of started going down this route of saying, hey, like, can we get funding from our user base, you know, our fans and stuff. But like the process to get there and educating users on what this meant, and like our user base just wasn't sophisticated enough at all to like understand any of these ideas. And so I think it'd be interesting to see just like how widespread this can become, and like how many people are actually interested in investing in something like this versus like Kickstarter, where you're investing in an idea and a product that essentially powers a company versus the actual company itself. But I think Rob made a really good point that like there's probably a huge swath of people that are educated and know what they're doing and would like to invest, but they just don't have necessarily the capital resources or to get accredited. So I think that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before.
So I thought I agreed with everything Rob said. I think things need changing, but how do you change them without attracting every con artist and digital drifter under the sun to rob rob the pockets of these people left, right, and center.
And that's why those rules were put into place. But I mean, realistically, just because you make $300,000 a year consistently for the past 3 years, I think is one of the rules for accredited investor, or you have over $1 million in assets, not including your house, is one of the other rules. That doesn't mean that you're good with money. They're just saying that is. And in fact, like the $300,000 salary rule always struck me as stupid because I grew up in the 80s during the Wall Street boom. And I was seeing people spending all of their like multi-million-dollar salaries on cocaine and like Lamborghinis and stuff like that. So like they obviously weren't good with money.
I was in the suburbs of London. It was teas and crumpet. It was teas and crumpet ever, you know. There we go.
Yeah. Well, no, but I mean, the people in London at that time were also doing the cocaine thing. I mean, like it was the same thing, like because finance cities are the same, like, and people, the more money they have, the more money they're going to spend it quickly. And we're seeing that right now with like all these crypto people, like, oh, they're hodling, they're doing like, oh, I'm gonna buy at the dip and then sell on the rumor and or buy like, I mean, they're doing all this stuff, but they don't understand any of it and they have no idea. So like the reason for the whole accredited investor thing isn't because you have money, it's because they're expecting you to understand what you're doing. And that's why you have to pass a Series 7 to be a fiduciary. That's why you have to understand, like they're expecting that you are not going to jump out of a window and commit suicide because like you didn't understand that your margin call like is going to show for a minute that you have no money in your account. Like every Friday afternoon when my portfolio is clearing, my account shows that I have no money for a good hour and a half. So if I'm looking at my account just then, it shows I'm broke and then it comes back. But if you don't understand that it's clearing at the end of the week.
Well, let's hope these Russian hackers don't get into it one day and it doesn't come back. But there we go. Spencer, what did you think of this?
Heather and I are on the same frequency today because I was going to bring up the fact that, again, I'm with you, John. I'm like the grandpa of this group. So I can remember the 80s and the 90s and all the rest of the decades very well at various ages of my life. And besides the cocaine and the partying and everything else, I think the cryptocurrency was what I was going to refer to, which is the problem with regulation.
I must have gone wrong somewhere. I missed out on the cocaine.
I mean, I was in my 20s in the 80s, so I mean, I was rocking and rolling too, but not with that, but with other stuff. And the 90s had their fun and, you know, blah, blah, blah. The thing that's interesting is regulation from the federal governments, especially the United States, have a history of coming in with good intentions, but heavy-handedly creating a set of rules that ultimately create a fence that other people take advantage of on the outside. So we've talked about in the show antitrust regulation all the time about how it is that there's a couple trillionaires that pay no taxes and a few companies that are taking advantage because they have the wherewithal to use the Sherman and Clayton antitrust laws in their favor and the middle guys don't. But here, I was going to say, this is hilarious because Rob's statements are very true. There's plenty of people that are more than capable with a very low degree of testing or curation to put their own money into play. But because of the heavy-handedness of this vintage law, you've really got a scenario where everybody's just taking their money and putting it into cryptocurrencies instead. So you've literally traded one drug for another drug. Now what happens? Are they going to create a whole nother set of like post-depression era anti-suicide laws around cryptocurrency? Maybe, but then people will move to the next thing. I think the solution is just to recognize that we live in a very dynamic world and the government's regulation, I mean, this is like talking about automatic. The government's regulation does not move at the speed of the technology. And so what you're always going to see is this cat and mouse game. I don't know personally whether cryptocurrencies are going to stay the same. It's a debate I have with my father and my friends all day long because it's literally gotten to epic ridiculousness proportions. There's no market fundamentals. There's memes, there's tweets, there's Saturday Night Live appearances that allow somebody on their own to move a currency 25 to 50% with no repercussions. That wouldn't go with any other kind of publicly traded stock. But I do find that like we're in a world where people are no longer like limited by the fundamentals of having to call a broker. The broker has to put in the trade, or going through the traditional, I got to get a bank to issue a check to give money to a venture-backed company. I mean, you now have a world where, for real, like somebody who wants to back a company could throw some Bitcoin or Ethereum at somebody and say, yeah, mark me down on the back books, and I'm an equity owner. And that would be the way that people might have to do this for the time being. So it's a fascinating environment for sure. But, you know.
Yeah. So, John, what do you reckon?
I think it's good that they're trying to allow normal people, when I say normal people, to try and invest in, angel investing, which it seems like this is an initiative to that. I understand that, people are going to do what they want with their money, whether that's put it in crypto, put it in stonks, or, whatever it is. But they're gonna, I think you got to give more people the opportunity to make some money. I think that's good for business. I think it's good for the economy. I think it's good for the citizens to be able to do that.
Yes, that cryptocurrency, if only I had invested. There we go. Another missed opportunity, but I can sleep at night. So there we go. So on to the next story. Is there any alternative to HubSpot? This is from Chris Lemmer. Chris, I just love you. If you want to buy my company, you can phone me anytime you like, Chris. But I have such mixed feelings about HubSpot. Part of me always thought it was just a great marketing machine that managed to get to empty the pockets of people that could have got, didn't really, just fell for the marketing spin. But other people really love HubSpot. So, Rob, somebody that has some knowledge of this particular area, only a little bit, what's your view of the success of HubSpot? They seem to have done a fantastic marketing job, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, HubSpot really hit this inbound. They coined this inbound marketing term and really doubled down on it. And I was on an early access list for HubSpot when this had to have been 2005 to 2007 as they were launching, because I was following one of their co-founders' blogs. Dharmesh Shah had a blog called On Startups, and so there were like 20 startup bloggers at the time or so. I mean, it was like, and I was one of them. And so I got on their early access list, and the first product, it was rough, right? Like any of us. And they launched and they iterated and they built a system to get a lot of people in. I agree with you. These days, HubSpot's it's a public company. It's obviously successful by all metrics, but there are absolutely solid alternatives to HubSpot that are either less expensive or have different functionality. I mean, there's a tool called ActiveCampaign that is really good. Chris Lemon proposes Bento, which I've never used, but I skimmed through their website in preparation for this.
Yeah, it's great. I could make head or tail their bloody website. My God, what a dog's breath! I thought
Bento.
Yeah,
it's very cumbersome.
I thought it was a dog's breath of a website.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot there. I was trying to absorb what they even do. So that's the bottom line. Is in any space when you get this large, there's going to be a lot of competition. I think when I read Chris's article, is there really an alternative to HubSpot? And then he has that phrase sprinkled throughout. I was like, this is an SEO play. He's trying to rank for this term more than,
Never. Chris would never do that.
Yeah.
Never,
and it's got a good old affiliate link right to Bento. So
I know.
Yeah, well, bless his little heart. He is a bit commercial, isn't he? But Spencer, what did you think? What is it with HubSpot? I've never fell under the spell of their marketing. Really, there we go.
Yeah. Well, a couple comments. First of all, because I love Chris and Chris is a fixture, nobody has to complain about it. But it's clear that this blog post is not a full-blown review or comment. It is a clever way to get a reader's attention. Let's put it like that nicely, because the answer is so clearly yes. I mean, HubSpot is HubSpot, but here's how it breaks down in my view of the world from a marketing automation on WordPress standpoint. And a lot of this, of course, has to do with WP Fusion's involvement. You have the traditional grandfathers, grandmothers of the industry, right? Your HubSpot, your Salesforce, your Infusionsoft. Mark Benioff, as a billionaire, can do anything he wants with Salesforce, but that's clearly an enterprise product. Whereas HubSpot and Infusionsoft Keep were kind of like the leaders in this space, as Rob indicates a couple years back. But since Drip and all the other ones got into the space, and ActiveCampaign is, I think, our leading choice at the moment of those, marketing automation has evolved from a use the platform exclusively to solve all your problems to a little satellite orbiting the WordPress stack, where now, especially, you can connect the features of a CRM you need, which are only 3 things. It's to track your contacts, apply tags and metadata, and to maybe use the CRM for email. But now the WordPress can competently do that through an SMTP connection, like Amazon SES. Even that is minimized. So now it's a matter of just dividing off the functionality of a CRM into a lane, just like many of the other components of WordPress, right? We have our LMS, your transactional engine, your maybe membership or sales funnel components. And so I would say that for most businesses, the choice is to actually look at the WordPress stack first. And one thing that we've talked about using, I did a video even as of last night, it's like Fluent CRM. Fluent CRM is a plugin model where the CRM functionality comes off of the SaaS and goes into a plugin as part of your WordPress stack. And that's a really compelling solution, one that I think the SaaS providers need to be aware of as well. While for an existing business, there's a ton of reasons to use the power of a real SaaS, like, there's so many other CRM functions. Most WordPress people, at least, don't need that kind of horsepower, right? They need the basics of marketing automation.
I think that was the thing for the articles, because a lot of people buy in it. If you're just buying into HubSpot and you're just going to use 20% of it, it's a pretty expensive 20%.
There's a lot of problems with HubSpot that I won't say are like a reason not to use them, but I will say this without being too political. HubSpot's promise is the platform and all the things you'll do on the platform. If you're using it as a CRM connected to WordPress, the value proposition does not hold up, and there's a lot of weird bargaining going on between the users.
That was the other area. Thanks for pointing that out, Spencer, because that was the other area that always annoyed me about them, was their inflated SEO lead generation.
It's just confusing promise. Like, if you want to use HubSpot exclusively, then a lot of the things they say would hold water, maybe for a value proposition or not. But if you're using it just for the CRM capabilities, then there's 49 other choices, many of which are clearly a better bargain and easier to use for lots of reasons, because you just leave everything else at the door.
Well, Heather, so, good luck to them. They've managed to build a very successful company. I never understood it. I never really understood how they I just thought it's just the spin, really. What's your views of the article and HubSpot?
HubSpot is great if you're just starting out and you're just using their free service, but it can get really expensive really fast. And but the good thing is they don't lock you in. It can cost thousands and thousands of dollars a year before you realize what you're in for. So, like the article said, though, there are lots of alternatives to using HubSpot. So once you realize what it is that you need, is it a CRM? Is it marketing? Is it personalization? Is it whatever? HubSpot is good for teaching you what it is you need, and then you can move to the best tool for that.
All right, then.
Well, I think.
Go on. Yeah,
sorry.
go on.
So, to me, HubSpot is more than just like fluff, because they really do have some of the most advanced features of all the other CRMs. I think this point was made in the article that they also have some of the most integrations. Something that challenge that I've ran into, like with ActiveCampaign, Drip actually has this feature, but a lot of other CRMs, I think Copper doesn't have this, and a couple others. But the idea of having objects that can be stored to users that have sub data. So you could say, hey, this user performed this action, and on this action, here are the 50 data points about this user. And then I can have an email that gets sent for that automation or for that action. that references all of these data points. HubSpot has that, and a few other CRMs have that, but many of them do not. And then once you take like that one idea and extrapolate that to chat and ticketing systems and all of these other like aspects that would be nice to know if your customer is engaging in something, HubSpot allows you to have a very sophisticated way of tapping into data, analyzing data, and tracking data. Migrating CRMs is like one of the biggest nightmares that anybody will ever engage in, like trying to get customer data to sync from one platform to another platform. So my thought is, if you have the money, it's better to buy the best or most expensive CRM that has all the features that you think you'll use, instead of using something just because it's cheap and it fulfills a need now, but you may have a need later on. But now, if you don't have $800 a month to throw away into a marketing automation system, I don't think you can cover 90% of everything else. It's when you start getting to those edge cases that having like a really enterprise level thing, I think, has a lot of benefits.
All right, I want to move on to the next story, actually, and then do our recommendations and wrap this up. So Jeff Bezos super yacht, so big it needs its own yacht. So John, I thought this was a kind of let them eat cake moment in American capitalism. What did you reckon about this one, John?
You always hear people say, like, he really doesn't have like all these hundreds of billions of dollars on hand, but then he goes and buys like a yacht with a smaller yacht like inside of it.
Well, you need one, don't you?
You need all that. I mean, meanwhile, you've got people at Amazon. They're trying to organize a union and they're getting union busted. You've got stories of people like drivers who are like peeing in bottles in order to make their delivery quotas. People being worked to death, not to death, but they're basically being worked like extremely hard, like beyond.
What it shows to me, John, is we've just gone through a terrible pandemic, and a lot of small businesses have been closed down. Obviously, Amazon benefited. They didn't close. It's done by the government for good reason. I thought their fulfillment centers was a breeding ground for the pandemic as well. But they benefit. But what it shows me is a total, how to put it in the right words, a total lack of empathy or any emotional business insight that this probably was not the right moment to have this publicized. What do you think I'm on the right track there, John?
Yeah, I mean, there's a growing disparity of wealth, and I've seen this stat several times where the American working class, they lost whatever the number is, like 70 billion or whatever, and then the billionaire class like earned 70 billion, and there's a direct correlation. It's not a coincidence that there's people at the very tippy top, like the very thinnest slice of the top of society. And this is like, these aren't like people who are like have $1 million rich. These are people who are like, we're going to like write the rules for society rich. And it's this disparity in wealth it's frightening, because laws just don't apply to you. And rules don't apply to you. You create the rules when you have this much wealth.
So, Rob, hopefully I'm a supporter of capitalism. I'm a supporter of small companies, and I love what you're doing. But what's your view about this and the timing of it? I had to really just shake my head, and like I said at the beginning, I really thought it was a let them eat cake moment. It's like really sticking your thumb up at the rest of society because of this pandemic. What do you think?
So I agree with the others in the sense that the wealth disparity, the wealth gap is a huge issue. It's something that needs to be solved. I'm a left-leaning person myself in terms of politics. So, but also obviously, I invest in startups. Like I believe that companies and capitalism is what makes America like one of the most amazing countries in the world. With that said, I'm going to cut against the grain in terms of Jeff Bezos is worth $200 billion. This yacht costs $500 million, which, it equates to if any of us had a net worth of $1 million, liquid net worth, it would be like spending $2,500 on something. So I'm going to tell you, my wife and I, with our kids, went to California for a couple months during the winter because we live in Minneapolis and because our kids were doing remote school for the first time ever. And we said, we're going to take a couple months. So we did that. While we were gone, we remodeled our kitchen. We spent more than $2,500 on that. So, but mine isn't publicized. You know what I mean? Because no one cares. And I think the timing to buy a yacht of this size is never going to be right. Right? I mean, he could have done it 5 years ago and people would complain. He could do it next year and people would complain. And I think, to be honest, I've heard all the stories as well about the people peeing in bottles. I follow the news as well. I've listened to a book. It's Jeff Bezos's annual shareholder letters, and it's called like Dream and Wander or Think and Wander or something like that. And I liked hearing his side of the story. I think he's right on a few things and wrong on some things as well. And so I think the fact that they do pay a $15 minimum wage now, I think the fact that they, have done all this work to help their workers have better conditions. I think if you have how many employees do they have? 1 million, 500,000? Like it's an enormous amount.
Yeah, I think they're one of the biggest employers.
It's enormous.
Aren't they?
That I do think that there are. I mean, this is again the law of large numbers. To come back to that, the larger events that I've thrown, the larger my audience has gotten, the larger our customer base got it drip. There would be these bizarre outlier thing of like, wow, 1 email in 1 million, this weird thing happens to, and we're never going to fix that. And I can see that. I can imagine someone telling a story of, hey, I peed in a bottle, and it gets. Of course, that's if they tell a reporter that's front page news. Is that really like? Have people shown that that's happening constantly? Is that an ongoing thing? According to Bezos, according to his managers, hey, people get these breaks. They're not judged by this and that. So I do think there are two sides to the story, and I'm certainly not I'm not pro Bezos and pro Amazon, but I also think that I don't know. He made a lot of money. He bought a boat. I don't think it's a big deal.
Well, I can see where you're coming from, Rob. It's always going to be pretty logical from you, but I just think it is that kind of reflection moment where poor Annette, she never actually said that. She never said let them eat cake, but when it became publicized in the slums of Paris, it was like gas on the fire. It enraged them. So in the end, chop their heads off, kill them all, Stephen.
It's easy to do that, right? Both with someone in power, but also it's easy to hate on billionaires these days. I think a lot of people really like to do it. Again, I'm not defending billionaires. I'm certainly not one myself, but I think we can get carried away with it.
Yeah. And
it's like he'll heat them, Rob, actually. It's just, go on. Sorry, Stephen.
No, I was just going to say that, like, people, I think the part that, like, I don't understand or that makes me a little frustrated is people complain about, everybody's net worth stuff. And now Jeff Bezos did probably one of the biggest things he's done in a while to reduce his net worth, buying a yacht, like, go try to sell that again. And now everybody's pissed at him for transferring this money to another company. And that company is now has $500 million more to pay their employees and their stuff. It's one thing, I think, for rich people to get more rich and maybe be mad about that because they're, exploiting something, but he paid probably fair market value for a crazy yacht. Like, his net worth has gone down. Like, the same people that are mad about his net worth, are mad about this too. So it just feels like it's a little bit contradictory.
Yeah, right. So Heather, what do you reckon? Is it a kind of, I can see both sides of it. I can see Rob, but also I can see the eat cake side of this as well.
I don't know if I should comment on this because I'm the one that lived on a yacht while building Evernote, and my dinghy was a jet ski. So like I had a boat with a smaller boat. So I mean, like,
I don't think it actually matched. But if you don't want to comment, I understand.
Well, no. I mean, like, I understand. I mean, it's just a percentage of how much money you have. I mean, like, he's got the billions, so he can have the billionaire boat with the other boat, and like that boat has a smaller boat, has other smaller. I've seen his boats, and like he has like the jet skis on the smaller boat, like just like me. So it's like, so my boat was like the smaller version of his, and as you get more rich, you just keep buying boats to the percentage of your richness.
If only I was there, Heather. Unfortunately, I'm not.
It doesn't mention the helicopters that are on his boat either. So.
But I don't feel deprived either. So, Spencer, to be serious though, for one moment, you know, in a way, I don't really care what he buys. You know, good luck to him. You know, it's not exactly my cup of tea. But I do actually fear that, you know, the way this goes down, the publicity around it is. It just enrages a situation that is pretty toxic anyway. Can you see where I'm coming from, Spencer?
Yes, but I'll address it a different way. This reminds me of so many movies, because there's the movie about like the end of the world where all the rich people get to go into some kind of ark that's like a spaceship, and then there's all the other apocalyptic global warming movies. I would ask one to consider, if you're the richest person on the planet, does it not seem logical that you have a space company and or a yacht big enough to live on forever? When the inevitable global warming floods the planet, you can either escape to space or you can float on your yacht and run the rest of the planet from there, like Noah and Noah's Ark. I mean, it's perfectly logical to me. If you're the richest person, you got to have some options. So I'm surprised anybody isn't even like looking at it from that perspective. I mean, nobody needs a $500 million yacht. There's only a practical purpose for it. But aside from that, to John's point, and I'm very far left leaning, but in a capitalist mindset as well, I think the difficulty that we face is that capitalism is right now really structured in America towards shareholder equity first, foremost, and forever. And as a result of that, we lose track of the fact that it exists inside the stadium of the public eye. So to John's question, you cannot have a healthy, let's say, baseball stadium where there's only skyboxes and then everybody else is like literally freezing to death downstairs, because it causes too much tension in society. Right now, we're in the sort of 99% to 1% or whatever the ratio is. And I think that that's unhealthy, because it's compounded by the things we see, like people investing the 12 cents they save from their menial labor job and putting it into Robinhood to try to buy cryptocurrency to pay for food or something illogical. We really need to look at, and I'm not a politics guy, but like some of the proposals as of late about what companies get away with taxation, what individuals who are wealthy get away with taxation, in order to further float the middle class. Because we did enjoy from World War II through Reaganomics with trickle-down bullshit, we enjoyed a very healthy middle class where a blue-collar worker could buy a house, raise a family, kids go to school, and that just does not exist in today's world at all. You either succeed as an entrepreneur, you succeed as like throw it against the wall and I hope it sticks in the stock market, or you're somebody that does, you know, something that is inherited. But everybody else is stuck in the middle and not in a very nice middle place.
I would argue that the myth of the entrepreneur is exactly that. It's a myth. Most people are not making money as entrepreneurs.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a very, very, very long shot, because the hero's journey of an entrepreneur is a tough, you know, it's a tough one. It's a lifestyle. It's not a, you know. Yeah. But see, that's what bothers me as an individual with kids and with aging parents. My parents are baby boomers. They sucked every last value and dollar out of everything that they got. And they're like rolling in cash and rolling in benefits and rolling in time. My kids, they're coming up into college age and they're faced with tough choices. And my generation, Gen X, we're just like, we're just happy to get by day to day, because we got to take care of being in the middle of this sandwich. And we don't have the leverage that we had in the 80s or the 90s when we were younger and more energetic. So it's a tricky scenario for normal people to look at.
So I want to, Rob, can you stay on with us for another 10 minutes, or do you have to? Because I know you're busy, but
I'm good.
Are you okay?
Yep.
Thank you for that, Rob. Before we go on to our recommendations of the week, I just want to tell the listeners and viewers about a webinar I'm doing with Spencer Forum. It's going to be about marketing automation. It's a series of 3. We did one last week. That was part 2. We've got one coming up on the 11th of June. That's the second Friday of June at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to throw it over to Spencer, and allow him to quickly tell us what we're going to be discussing in part 3.
I would love to have Rob on this webinar. That would be a treat. We're in part 3. We're in the home stretch. So we've had the first 2 webinars in April and May, where we've identified the stack of plugins that in WordPress allow WordPress to become better than most SaaS solutions, like a ClickFunnels. We talked about last week configuring the stack and some use cases. And in this 3rd episode, all of the videos will be for free on the link that I provided there. We're going to talk about how to launch the stack with some specific use cases, how in 2021 and beyond, marketing automation is different from a strategy perspective. So, and I look to Rob because, again, I remember many of your own drip comments and teachings about this. There was a time, if you're a fan of Ryan Dice and Perry Belcher and Digital Marketer, that you would take somebody's email and promise them to send 65 drip emails to nurture them through whatever you're teaching. Those days are over, in my opinion. Instead, you want to have a WordPress website that will inform somebody when you learn about them to go to the website, because when they do, you can not only deliver dynamic content, but you can also track what they do. And people just don't really enjoy, I think, today, the volume of emails that they get for other purposes. So it's a less busy channel when you make use of your new marketing automation system. And I think that's what we're going to show people, how easy it can be. And it's no code, no design, plug and play like Lego blocks. So if you followed the first 2, awesome. If not, you can watch the first 2 videos free. I put the link in there over at WPLaunchify.com. And I hope you'll join us for lunch. It's a very lightweight thing, too. We're not going to talk your ear off for very long.
That's great. I really enjoyed the past 2, and I'm really looking forward to this one as well. So please join us if you want to sign up and get a notice later on when the Friday is approaching. All you have to do is go to the WP-Tonic website. There's a button right in the top navigation that says webinar. You click it, you just give your name and email, and when we get closer to the webinar, we'll send you a reminder so you can join us live. Right, so let's go to our recommendations. And panel, please put them in the Slack channel. Rob can't, but hopefully he will email that if he's got a recommendation. Heather, have you got a recommendation you want to share with the listeners and viewers?
I do. So I am the organizer of a conference, multiple conferences, but this one is Devox UK. So normally it's just in the UK, so you'd have to fly there. But this year we're doing it hybrid and online and in person. It's in November, but the call for speakers is now open. So I would love for everyone to submit a paper or a talk to the Devox UK. There's multiple tracks. I am heading up the people and culture track, so please submit something.
All right. So, Rob, have you got something you want to plug or recommend to our beloved audience?
Something that I've been really digging the last few weeks, especially, is the All In podcast. It's hosted by Jason Galcanis and his he calls them the besties, but it's a few folks out in the Bay Area. And I'm not in like the venture capital Silicon Valley scene. Like, it is just, I've always been an outsider. I don't really care that much about it, and except for in the way that it impacts, bootstrappers and such. But I really like the perspectives on there, and I like that there's both conservative and liberal viewpoints. I like that they talk very educated about things that they know a lot about. It's not a pundit on a news show, a cable news show that obviously has not researched this or obviously doesn't know much about it, hasn't been a practitioner. The 4 of them have either been founders or investors or both. And it's just one of it's one of the best podcasts that I've discovered in 2021.
Oh, great. Yeah, Jason, love him and hate him. He's always entertaining.
Yeah, me as well.
Yum, yum, as he would say.
So
Yeah, yum yum. Stephen, got anything you want to recommend?
Yeah, there's nothing in life that brings me more joy than working in my garden. And this week I acquired a new spade. And one would think that all shovels are the same, but they are not. If you're looking to do edging around your garden, get a tile spade or a drain spade, as they're called, and it will revolutionize your edging and digging life.
I'm getting worried now, Stephen, but never mind. Oh, there we go. Make sure. Spencer, got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, sure. This is kind of unique, but if you are playing around with your plugins and you find that you're often trying to add things and remove them, there's a tool, the WP Faves plugin manager, that allows you to essentially create your own bookmark for self-installing groups of WordPress plugins. So it's just a nice little helper. There's other ways to do it as well. But if you find yourself trudging through the world of the WordPress repository one too many times looking for that thing you used on another website, this is a good way to just make it easy to go to your favorite thing and go, yeah, add this whole group into my new site or something of that nature.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. John, got anything you want to recommend? Oh, he's got a book. Dog Whistle Politics.
Dog Whistle Politics, how coded racial appeals have prevented racism and wrecked the middle class. So this is it's all about coded language and how it's used in politics, in the media, in our everyday lives. And I'll tell you something, like this has been pretty much since the beginning of the 80s. This has been a strategy that a lot of people use. A lot of the things that are said in here that were said in the early 80s, I heard repeated back to me in the 90s by people, and I'm still hearing it today. So it really kind of exposes how you don't say things directly, but you dance around the subject. But the people who need to understand what it means, they understand what it means. So just an interesting book.
I have that problem, John, being English. I think most of the time my American audience understands nothing I say, but there we go. I'm going to let the panel so quickly. Heather, how can people find out more about you and your whispering?
You can find me at Heathriel on all the socials or at heathriel.com.
And Rob, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to in your words of wisdom, Rob?
Well, if folks listen to podcasts, I am at startupsfortherestofus.com, where 30 to 40 minutes every week, I'm talking about this kind of stuff, plus startup SaaS and bootstrapping.
And I just want to thank you for your podcast. I've learned an enormous amount from it, Rob.
Welcome.
Stephen, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, head over to zipfish.io, run a speed test, and see how much faster we can make your website.
That's great. And John, how can people find out? Oh, sorry, Spencer. How can people find out more about you and what you're up to, Spencer?
At WPLaunchify.com.
And John, how can people find out more about you?
LockdownSEO.com.
That's great. We'll see you next week for another great roundtable. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.